Hello, I'm Chris Athanas. I'm a KMP developer, and tech support's coming out Tuesday. They said. We'll see. I'm going to be doing a book review on this book called Mastering Kotlin for Android. You know, the reason I'm doing this review for this book is that this book actually covers all the bases that you really do need to know, not in super detail, but like an overview of like, this is what you got to think about for doing an Android app. And this is really great for KMP, people that want to do KMP and they're coming from iOS. If you're coming from iOS, this is going to give you a good overview, not in iOS terms, in Android terms, which is good because Android's its own thing, of how to get your app, some gotchas along the way, and it's broken up into 4 parts: building your app, using advanced features, code analysis and test, and then publishing your app. And you could, of course, find a lot of this stuff already on the internet, but it's like, this is for like an iOS dev that wants to come in. It's like, what is all the Android stuff all about? And like, what do I need to know? It's not as bad as you would think. There's some little gotchas along the way. It's definitely, I am an Android developer, and I've just started working with iOS this past year or so. iOS is a lot easier. It's not as crazy. It's not as wacky doodle dandy about stuff that Android seems to be, just because the history of where it came from and how it was developed. And it's just been actually iOS devs, or they're coming in at this moment of Android. It's been pretty calm ever since Compose was announced. And Kotlin was changed as a language. We went through a bunch of rapid changes, 2018 to 2020 or so. But since then, it's been relatively calm. Like, I think JetBrains coming on board and Google adopting KMP as the preferred choice. If you're going to be doing an Android app, you should be doing a KMP app at this point. It's JetBrains has just been working on this problem a lot longer, and they have things that are like in the bit of the pipeline that we're just now seeing that they've planned out super well, like compared to Google. Let me just say that, like, they seem to be a little more stable, a little bit more sane. And this is Harun Wangireka, he's got the best last name after mine, of course, Wangireka. And this is the author here, and I think he's from Kenya. Yeah, he's from Kenya. And this is Dimitri, and he's one of the guys that worked on it too. And he's not an Android dev, which is cool because you want to come in with somebody with like fresh eyes. This is like where I think this book got a lot of influences from Dimitri, because he's like, what is this stuff? What is that stuff? Like, it's like, and if you've already done Android, you have an expert that kind of knows, but you don't know like the fresh eyes coming in like from something else completely different. Like, how does that work? And like, this is why I can feel the connection here that he brought in. And then also this is another reviewer, and he's got some props, but he's also a younger developer. It's like, okay, so what kinds of concerns they have, and how do you want to approach this stuff. So I think the flavor of the book is quite good, but it's for people that are have some development knowledge already. This is not a beginner's book at all. It's more about an overview. Let's get into it. So I'll leave this pane open here. Oh no, I'll hide it. Here we go. Let's go over here. So this is some things I wanted to. Some of the source code here I'm going to be talking about as I review the book. And here's the depot. You can go check out the source code now if you want to go follow along. But it breaks up into chapters. You do need to open up each chapter in turn for it to work. You don't want to open up this. You want to clone this here, right? But you want to open up each one of these folders individually into IntelliJ or Android Studio. So I'll hide that down. So and I'll hide this for right now. Yeah. And we can my desktop all set up here. This is, I want to discuss things about how we had some structures. Okay, so here's some intro pages. Here's nice little dedication, beautiful. And here's all the he's the author and the reviewers. I think did a great job. Usually these books are really like crappily put together, especially for Android. I don't know what the problem is, But like for Android, they really just like kind of phoned it in. I'm not really sure why, but this guy did a really good job. So here's the contents here: material design, architecture, network calls, navigation, persisting data locally, and doing backward work. This is going to be confusing. This is going to be good for iOS developers because I don't think they have anything like this on iOS. So Android handles things differently because your app can be closed and not even launched, and you can have things still going on in the background and stuff. And there's a lot of things that, honestly, iOS does way better than Android in this regard. But because of how this is put together, this is what we got. And this is better than rolling it your own, because before that you would have to roll it your own, and there's all kinds of gotchas because all these power saving features that honestly the OS should be handling like you do on Apple, but for some reason all those details get pushed down to Android developers as the default. No, you have to deal with all these details. Like, I don't really know. Can I just deal with like one level up? And this is an attempt, pretty good. I mean, Work Manager is a pretty good attempt at like doing that background task processing, and we've come a long way with the persistent data locally, that's for sure, with ROM and things like that. Runtime permissions, they handle completely different on Android than iOS. iOS, it's just like you just ask for the thing and it kind of just works, and you put one line in a resource file somewhere. That's like the question you're going to ask the user for asking for this permission. But on Android, you have to handle it with code. Again, that stuff should be like edge case, but it's like, no, you're going to deal with all of it. They're an Android developer, so you're going to deal with it. All of it. There's not going to be an easy API that's got a bunch of like sensible defaults. No, you got to deal with all. You got to flick all the switches, and sometimes it's great, and sometimes, man, it's just a lot to take in. So that's just one thing. So debugging your apps and Leak Canary isn't as big a deal with Compose and KMP applications because of how they're structured and how they work. I'm sure you can still do leaks in KMP Compose type apps, but I'm not really sure. It's not been a stress thing like how it has been on Android. Like, it's just been so easy to make some real leaks all over the place. So that used to be more of a thing. And this chucker thing, I never got this to work. I've always been like using the latest versions of Android Studio just to get the KMP stuff going and KMP updates going, which is only for latest Canary builds. And this chucker stuff, he said, I contacted him. He's like, nobody supports me. He's like, I don't get any users. I'm not making any money on this. And so I think that's why I put chucker in here. But it only works with the release, not beta, not alpha, not Canary. So that's about that. And there's alternative stuff that makes it maybe moot. I don't know. Having to use third-party tools for network traffic is a little like. So enhancing code quality. Let's see. So this is KTLin. I haven't used this, but I've heard good things about it. And this detect, I also see that used quite a bit. So these are the kinds of things that are like nice to know for the 2024, 2025, maybe 2026. Because these things are kind of stabilized. These things have been around for a while, these tools. But with Kotlin, man, it doesn't seem to be as critical. These tools aren't as critical for the Compose and for Compose apps, and like the way the Android stuff used to be written with all the imperative stuff and XML. Yeah, it's the same like having to deal with the marshalling yourself, like with the RPC, with Kotlin RPC. There's no marshalling, there's no HTTP. It's just you write a function here, you write a function there, and it does all the stuff behind the scenes, and you don't have to worry about it. With Android, you had to worry about every little thing previously. So Compose is this like revolution. It's like, no, we don't have to worry about this whole imperative thing with UI. So a lot of this stuff has gone away, or it's not as critical. Let's put it that way. Testing your app, so testing view models. This is good stuff because it's not. I mean, the documentation's getting better with this, but it's just like, and nobody does it because it's such a pain in the ass. And anytime you change something, you have to change the test. It's like it's getting actually better. Some of the Compose tools coming out, which I think he gets into a little bit here, are better than what we've had to deal with. So a lot of this is just Google like, hey, testing. What do you mean testing? Oh, I guess we can add that on. it's like an afterthought. It's starting to become a primary thought. So we'll get into that a little bit. Publishing your app, how to go through all the channels. I mean, it's pretty straightforward, but like there are some gotchas that you really want to know about that they don't really explain very well. It's like it's really kind of crazy that Google's have all this time to like do the most optimally beautiful set of documentation so anyone can like follow. It's like, no. He's left it from like 20 years ago, 15 years ago. It was good enough, got it there, whatever. Android developers will figure it out. So brutal. Anyway, you're coming in at a good time because they're starting to get to the point like, no, you got to make this easier. So this book definitely is a nice overview. I would have liked to have seen all this overview as opposed to having to learn every little piecemeal and like get some gotchas at the beginning on dev teams with some of the people that knew how to do this left, and there's some like cargo culting with some of this stuff because it's like there's just so much detail you have to like understand. You have to understand the details without fully having to deal with. So the tools they give you at the Google Play Store is like really meant for big companies with like layers of the management. But as a solo or a small team dev, you have to still deal with all that stuff. Like most of it can throw it out. Most of it you just don't even use. So again, 20%, you're gonna use 20% of it. So there's a lot of that in Android. There's a lot of that. Continuous integration. Okay, if we're doing so if you got a team of like maybe 4 to 5 people, you probably want to set this up at some point. Before that, I don't know if it's necessary, but like teams I've worked on have done both. They do the CI/CD and just everyone before you deploy, before you push to the store, do the test, please. But like, it wasn't as strict. But if you have a team of 5 or more, which I don't recommend, but like if you need to get that size, you're gonna have to set that up. So this is a really great rundown what she talks about, and I'm gonna skim through it, of course. So this is unusual to find. It's kind of hard to find how to do this properly and what's the best practices. And then you've got some Firebase Crashlytics and Firebase messaging. So just a little extras there, which is nice. Preface, blah blah blah. So Java Virtual Machine, Google, blah blah blah. Okay, who's this book for? So it's like already working with Java. So like you've already started looking at Kotlin or Java, and it's make this a little bit bigger. There we go. So you already know the language, and you or you've done some Android development or looked into it, or at least just learned Kotlin. Then you're ready to go for this stuff. But this is not a Kotlin guide. You're not going to learn. They're not going to try to teach you here. So he goes over what the chapters cover, which I kind of went into already. He's using Hedgehog, which is pretty recent. This book came out like 4 months ago of this time of this video recording. It's about 4 months old. This has been around. The stuff that's in here is, other than the Compose stuff, a lot of this has been around for years. So, but putting it in one place is pretty hard to find. I haven't seen a book like this. This is why I want to do this review, is because it's all in one place. So some conventions. Let's talk about how things get in touch. Share your thoughts. Now he does give you a free. Now if you buy the hardcover, he gives you the free version, the PDF version of this. So you can have it on your computer, which is nice. That's nice to do that. If you're going to be really studying this thing, I mean, having the hardcover is pretty cool, and having the reference to it. But the PDF is fine for most developers. I think a PDF is going to be good enough. So there's Kotlin. He just gets a little bit of stuff in here into Kotlin, some of the features of it, why people are using it, why we switched away from Java. This is like the politically correct thing, but it was because Oracle's like, we're gonna charge you guys now. And they were like, oh really? We have this thing. We've been cooking over here for a couple of years, thinking that you might pull this stunt, thinking that. And that was a big reason Google's like, nah, we're gonna just switch out the language now. Thank you. It wasn't all that great to begin with. We kind of pushed it to its limits. So here's the thing. Right here's the thing that's interesting. Right here, Kotlin multi-platform and Kotlin server-side. So Kotlin multi-platform includes Kotlin Android, Kotlin JavaScript, Kotlin native, and I don't know about data science. That's something else. That's out of my ballpark. I'll probably work with people that do that stuff, whatever. But I'm not in that space. That's a dedicated thing. All right, so he talks about a little bit of the features of the language. He talks about how to open up and create a project, creating functions, creating classes. Okay, so just some basics for Kotlin, and 2017 is when we came online with that. It was like a breath of fresh air. I mean, it was kind of annoying. It's like, we gotta learn another language. But when we discovered what it was, Kotlin was like, oh, this is actually better. This actually makes things like a 50% easier. So, why didn't we have this before? It should have been like this from the beginning. And then the next big revolution that came through, and people still haven't quite adjusted to how amazing this has been for developer productivity. And then this is the basis of KMP for all the different platforms. Oh yeah, this is a game changer. And you don't have to use the structures that he recommends in these apps. For Fred's road trip storyteller, I don't use any of the view models, dependency injection, none of that stuff. And then you can read the code. It's obvious what it does. There's nothing else going on. And where it tested, like the inputs and outputs, unit tests. Okay, yeah. But like, you don't have to go crazy into all the details. I mean, if you're going to do enterprise level stuff, yeah, maybe I could see that. But for just getting an MVP out, you can always bolt that stuff on later once you do the next version of the app, which you should do. All right, here we go. Coroutines. So this is the Mac Daddy. The Compose and the coroutines. Man, before that, background tasking and getting off thread was just like a clusterfuck. Like I cannot believe we spent so much many years dealing with that stuff, and it was such garbage. And they knew it, and they pushed it out, and they didn't change it. It's just like, no, just every once in a while the phone will crash. So bad. Anyway, support from Google, yeah. So there's like, okay, they finally gave over control. We give up. We're not doing this great. We'll be the marketing arm. We'll talk to all the manufacturers. We'll make the new hardware. We'll do that part of it, but you guys do the language and the IDE and everything else. So they let JetBrains take over big chunks of this, which is great. They've done a great job compared to. I won't keep hammering, but it's been bad. All right, so your first app. So just through here, how to set up a new app and what kind of plugins. So yeah, your plugin here. Yeah, there's some plugins that I like to use, which maybe I'll list. It goes into some of the details of what these features are for, which is super useful to know as an iOS developer. These are Androidish things like manifests and what all these different what's a package, like what are resources, what are they defined as. The Gradle is the building tool, which iOS doesn't really have that thing. It's kind of like it does the Xcode platform does it, but on Android we have a whole Gradle is the build system for it, and man, it's a pain in the dick. It's meant for enterprise stuff. It was so flexible that they use it for Android to get everything working, but it was just been, I don't know. I've just been had the most horrible time with it, but thank God. People at JetBrains have announced a new type of build tool that's specifically more honed for what people are doing modern with it without using this Gradle stuff, which definitely confuses beginners tremendously. It's just because the error messages are just so cryptic and like don't even point to the thing that's actually the problem. It's just been a nightmare. And I have yet to meet a dev that's been like, oh, Gradle's the best. It's like, no, if you try and do it, I mean, I've definitely like gone down the rabbit hole and test, that's the stuff out, but man, let me see my recording caught up. Okay. All right. So this is how you add libraries with these dependencies and implementation stuff here. What's a namespace? There's this, config classes. Okay, so there's all these different things that are like, what is this? And so there's no like, the documentation is terrible from Gradle. Where those people they just been phoning it in for a long time, and I don't know. I was hoping the documentation would get better. But you just go check it out. You'll see what I'm talking about. So it just explains some of these options here. Gradle.properties, these different files that are available, and how developers usually use them, this is useful to know, like what is all these things for. So it's a nice handy guide for looking at an existing Android app that you may have to turn into KMP, or like you're an iOS developer and you want to see how the Android stuff is put together. Yeah, this is pretty decent guide. So presentation. So here he's talking about. Oh yeah, there's different things. This is a nice breakdown of that stuff. Okay, Jetpack Compose. So here's he gets right into the UI kit. Is this declarative? Before that, it was imperative. Like, okay, put this box here, change this box here, change that box here. Oh, I got an update. I got to go through and change it. Instead of having it the declarative style, which is more like I think the Swift UI is this very similar idea as a Swift UI. You just have it's extremely parallel. So the conversion, the mental switch to Compose is really not that bad. It's not that bad compared to the switch from XML to Compose. Yeah, for a lot of devs, like what the hell is all this? But if you looked at React, like a lot of these ideas came from React. How they did their declarative UI stuff. So I already knew React. Like I learned that, and once Compose came along, I was like, oh, we're just doing it like that. Okay, fine. It's got a little different syntax, a little bit smarter syntax. Some things are a little confusing, but it's overall way better than the XML stuff, which is like, dude. No, that stuff was terrible. And anybody's like, no, I was very efficient. Well, I guess you got to work with got to know all the little quirks. You don't have to know all the little quirks with this Compose stuff. I think it has little things, but nothing like it's terror like level as XML. Jeez, croakers. Okay, here we go. Declarative versus imperative. So he just goes into what I was just saying there. Yeah, here you just say, I want a text box, I want a spacer, I want a button. Yeah, so it's fun to play with. And this is how we used to set it up with the XML. It's like, ugh, no, please make that stop, make that go away. And it was like you had to know what all these little colons were. There's no hints. You had to know everything. What a cluster. Okay, this is the result of years of like adding on, and not really thinking too far ahead because it was better than nothing, right? It was better than what we had before, which was zero. Okay. Granted, we give give the credit is due. Okay, yes. All right. So there's that. This is how it used to work with the on-click listeners and all that other stuff. So yeah, this is much more like how websites are set up. So I think this is where they got the idea from. Is from HTML websites, I guess, because that's what it kind of is. It's like you have a page and there's stuff on it and you can set click listeners and respond to click listeners and respond to events and stuff. But it's half-assed. It was just clusterfuck. I mean, it worked. It does work, but it's not very pleasant to deal with. Especially if you're going in and you're trying to fix or change something. Because there was not a lot of advice given about how to structure things. And people just kind of went off on their own and just went out. They went different directions. And they were kind of all started converging in on this Compose type declarative style. And this is what we have now. So we have the declarative style. So it's just much more cleaner. There's not a mysterious file someplace else. It's getting referenced in and expanded out and memory allocated and deallocate. It's like you're not worrying about any of that stuff. It's abstracted away, and for good reasons. You don't need to know all that stuff. So pure functions. It's just there's nothing. You pass in one thing, you get the same thing out. That's all that's about. Make a big deal about it, but in the days of imperative when things were all changing, all flickering all over the place, and you had no idea what was updating what, yeah, it was a problem. So they made a big deal about it with that change, so people could oh, this is different. Modifiers. So this is how you design all the changes and all the colors. So it talks a little bit about how things are drawn and put together, and it's different than the XML stuff, and it's just way easier to understand. I would skip XML altogether if you can, and just do Compose and don't worry about that crazy stuff. In fact, if you do get a project, I would say try not to use the code from that and just redo it in Compose. It'll probably save you time. And then trying to understand what the hell's going on with XML if you haven't looked at it before. Here, there's these lists. Just doing these lists in the XML version would require these custom code things which could easily be got wrong and broken and super hard to update, and now it's all collapsed into items. A lazy column, lazy grid items. It's like, oh, what? That makes the things okay. That's way easier. And then try writing all that boilerplate code over and over and over and over and over. It's like goofy, but we did it. It's what we did. Now we're not doing that anymore. So material design 3. So this is just the colorings and styling and of your app, shapes, like how your buttons look, and your color scheme, and things like typography, things like that. And then we have all these different built-in things. These are also called Material 3 components that make a lot of sense. Like, you don't have to do a lot of your own custom UI work, and it's actually quite discouraged for a lot of things unless you have a real good reason to redo it. These have been battle-tested ideas, and your users are already prepared. And I know it's not impressive to other developers, like, ooh, it's just standard stuff, but your users, if you're trying to get in and out of your app, and for micro monopoly applications, the app is not the thing. It's just a way to serve your business, right? It's just a way to serve the business, the app. So people want to go in your app, do your thing, and out. And this is a standard pattern that they're already used to. You will have less customer support problems. You will have less people using assistive technologies. So you'll have all that stuff will be skipped, and you won't even see it. You won't even know it's there because people are not having a problem with some custom design. And you can make it really pretty, and you have a lot of choices to make it different and unique looking without having to go through the whole, I'm going to make it a fantastically different UI and the most unique and some art site. It's like, no, don't do that. Stop trying to impress somebody other than your customer. Holy crap. So it goes through how to set up some of this stuff, which is really kind of nice. Have a nice little overview of how these things are put together. He does put all the source code there, and it's big type and stuff. So if people do want to type it in, they can. I don't know if it's useful to type it in, but it is useful to know what is all this stuff for. What does all these things mean? Because when you're first coming into it, you're like, what is a side effect? Like, what is this material thing? It's like having a little guy next to your shoulder. Like, what's this? I'm sure that's how they got this. I'm sure that's how they wrote this. Is like the reviewers going like, what the hell is this shit? Or like, what is this thing for over here? And he's like, okay, we'll just put that in the book. We'll just put that conversation in the book. So that's what that is, I believe. And so large screens and foldables. I have not done a lot of work in the large screens and foldables. So this book actually introduced me to how you handle different. Well, large screens, I knew how to do that, but the foldables, like, how the hell does that work? Well, it goes into it. It's pretty nice. Right here. It's pretty easy, pretty straightforward. For Compose, it's kind of delightful. I'll use that word. Compose makes dealing with all these different screen sizes and shit delightful. I said it. Before this, it was nightmare. XML, nightmare. Everything. Oh, we have to do a new API. It's like with Compose, there's no. It's just a couple extra calls. Calm down, everybody. Calm down. All right, so here we go. So it goes into some more stuff about how Material 3 works, how to put these things together. So your users, it just skims. He's just like, hey, go this direction. Don't do everything custom crazy. Go in this direction with Material 3. It'll save you time. If at some point it becomes necessary, if you have users that are like, oh, your app is too ugly, well, okay, maybe you need to change it. All right, fine. So here's some architecture talking about the different, the reasons why you want to have an architecture, which I'm a big fan of the simple architectures, and that's why I was like showing off, like his architecture pattern here. It's how you put these, how you set your application up, and where you put all these different views and things. I don't really like this style. I like the style I have for the example in my Tasky that's on my GitHub. I prefer this type of packaging where you do it by feature. And he's doing it by the standard way, like by the concern, right? But I do it by feature. And inside each feature, then I break it out into the data, which is your networking or wherever your outside data sources, whether it's a file or whatever. This is your operating system, your domain, which is the core of your application, doesn't know about where the data is coming from. It's just operating on that data. And then the presentation, of course, is your UI. And I also like to put a util folder. Some people say they don't do that, but I like to put a util in here. But that has has all the things that won't go anywhere else that are custom to used by other things. Another word for this is common, but I went through Philip Lackner's mentor course for, what was it, 3 or 4 months or something like that. And we talked about all these different things, the pros and cons. A lot of this stuff is very open to interpretation. But the one thing that seems to be clear is to separate things out by your features and by your core. And I like to put the DI separate. Some people like to put it in the core, but I think DI is like a global thing. So this is like, it gets a much better view of like, if I'm going to go into the auth, I want to know where auth is at, and then I want to know each one of the screens inside the presentation is its own thing, and then they break that out this way. Here with this, it's unclear which screen goes for which wing. These are all the views, yes. These are, if you need to look at a view, it'll be in here somewhere. But where, which one, why? And like here, it's more clear. It's like if I'm going to be in the auth feature, I'm on the presentation components and screens just for the auth feature. I don't care about the agenda feature. So this is where I have a little bit of detraction from the book. But again, these are topics that we discuss often, and there are pros and cons to everything. So here's easy testing, easy maintain, easy scale, work in teams. Okay, that's the reason why you are in architecture. And there are some standard ways people put applications together. But in the light of the KMP, some of these things don't need to be architected so crazy. You can make each screen make a little app. Just like how Android was intentionally, the first versions of Android were like, every screen's a little app. And they separated that out. They got rid of that idea because they thought there'd be this major cooperation between everyone, that everyone would be doing their own little screen and you just swap them in and out. It's like, now we have to do branding. Sorry, sir. So they did these single page, single pane applications, and then now we're in the Compose, and I don't think a lot of these architecture patterns are necessary in KMP. And you can see what I've done with my Fred's Road Storyteller and the Cloud View USA. Those are so simple. Those apps are so simple and straightforward, even though they do some complicated things. I didn't really need to have a big gnarly architecture pattern and stuff in there. So, but for larger applications that need more than 30 screens, 20 screens is the limit I think I would do on my Fred's road trip. I think 20 would be the max for that type of architecture. For bigger applications, I think you may need to go into this. And it's good to know that how these work if you're going to be working for other people. And my favorite, of course, is MVVM. If you're going to be doing this kind of architecture style, but I guess it's the way I'm doing Fred's road trip storyteller. It's the view and the model. I guess it'd be the model view intent. But there's not one collector. Model view intent is just like there's one only one path through each time. I guess it'd be more like a MVVM style, where there's not just one path, there's multiple paths, and they all could be independent working. Just depends on your use case. Like, just to think about the use case. So he talks about how these things are put together, what a view model is, sort of like the controller part of the view. You separate the view. The view's stupid. You just give it data, and it just displays stuff. And the controller is the view model. The controller is the one that actually dictates what goes where, like from the data source to the screen. So that's the whole point of that, is to separate those things out. So they're separate out. And the tools we've had before they're okay. He likes to use Coin, which is a runtime. It's not really a dependency injection, but he uses Coin for these bigger projects. Coin is a lot easier to use, but you'll get runtime errors with the Hilt, which I don't recommend using Dagger 2, but Hilt allows you to have more. It's a compile time, so if the things aren't wired up properly, you'll get compiler errors. But man, it's still, the messages are really odd, and the concept behind it's very strange. It is possible with Compose and Kotlin that you don't really have to use those libraries. You can just do your own DI just by having a global object and allocating stuff inside there, so you don't really need to use these libraries. But for larger projects, I think that's when it becomes more important. I just think with KMP and Kotlin-based applications, you don't have to be as... I don't think you have to be as use this stuff, because in Android it was pretty critical because of how things were set up when we were just like clunking along and adding on to things, like fixing problems that weren't there. A lot of this stuff is fixing problems that were Android problems that maybe now KMP problems. All right, so that's what that's about. Yeah, background jobs, performance, blah, 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 depend. Here is what I was talking about. I just went on KMP. So yeah, he's talking about Coin here, which is a runtime thing, which everything's done at runtime. And that's what I'm suggesting too. Is if you just do your own DI by allocating objects when they're needed, you don't really have to use this stuff. So, but a lot of people love it. A lot of old Android devs, it makes them feel comfortable coming and still using this stuff. I think they're probably, yeah, so KMP, I believe, is going to have all the view model stuff and all the, I think it's Coin is KMP. I'm not sure if Hilt is going to be a KMP. That's unclear whether we even need it for KMP. But I think Coin is going to be a KMP thing. So version catalogs, it talks about creating good versioning, which is the versioning on Android has been so crazy all over the place. People have to do it so differently. Every project's different. So he goes here. This is the old style here. It was just a mess. Like, just this, all this stuff is really hard for beginners and even for experienced devs, because you really do have to know how these libraries are handling things for you in detail. It's annoying. I wish this. I hope there's something that is done about this. It seems to be getting a little bit more sane, but for the longest time, it's been gnarly balls. And using a version catalog, so you're keeping track of the versions of all your stuff. This is something iOS doesn't really have as big an issue with. It's just like you have one library that does like everything, or just a couple libraries, and they're all from Apple, and they set the cadence and stuff. So I don't think they have the same issues. But on Android, because it's open source and because it's just been a clusterfuck. I don't know all the reasons why, but this is how it's been, and you have to know all these different versions of all these different little parts of parts of open source projects that are used to build your application. It's becoming more sane, but you still have to kind of deal with it a little bit. That's just the way it is. KMP is changing a lot of that stuff by having one library that does all the things. And the KMP stuff seems to be a little bit more sane, and there seems to be a little bit a little bit more stable than what we've had to deal with so far. So we're doing some legacy stuff, leftover stuff, and ways of building projects that have just been in the past. So he's talking about retrofit here. I'm a big fan of KTOR client. There's not as much of the setup stuff, and there's not as many annotations. It just makes more sense, and you don't have to worry about it, because once you use it once, you don't have to use retrofit on. Once you use KTOR client one place, you get it for the KMP. So you get it web, you get iOS, you get Android, you get the desktop. I don't know if retrofit's going to be going there. So, but it's what's been done. It's what's been used on Android for many years for apps. Not many, but for many, almost all the apps use this retrofit. So it's good to know how it works and what it's put together and all the things you need to do to make it work. Which is, I had to go through and learn all that stuff too, and it's just okay. I know what all this stuff means, and you have to go learn what all these little things mean. And this is a useful guide of how it puts together how you create the instance of the object and all this stuff, and all stuff works. Okay, so coroutines gets into coroutines, which I think are called tasks on iOS for Swift. I think that's what they are. A very similar idea. It's like a little off-thread or on-thread background tasks that's being cooperatively multitasked, built into the language, how the language works. It's really quite good how it works, and makes background tasking and async tasking so easy to deal with. So there's a little bit of like learning of what's going on here, and eventually it kind of clicks. But in the beginning, it's a little odd. But especially when you have to use it with other libraries, like retrofit. But if you use the KTOR stuff, the KTOR client stuff, it's like, oh, this isn't super hard. This like makes sense. So KTorch client is a little bit more advanced and meant for, and had the years to change and adapt and make more sense than the retrofit. So so there's all some more networking stuff. It is good to know and explain how these things are put together, and then how they interact with the UI. He also has, looks like he's using, oh, that's Compose, I think. It might be a library like Coil. So he's got, so there's all these permissions you have to add to the manifest, similar to like you have to add certain iOS resources for different permissions that you want on in your app. This is a very similar thing, except it's just a little bit more detailed, like a little bit more as if it was done by a committee for all these different permissions and stuff. And you have to not only you have to declare the permission, then you have to deal with it at runtime. And how else is all this on the iOS, of course, is isolated away. It's like abstracted away. But on Android, you have to deal with it directly. And there's some libraries that help with all this stuff, but it's like, I'm hoping KMP does something that abstracts this away, but it's not there yet. I hopefully they're going to do something that makes it abstract this stuff away, so we don't have to worry about it, but right now we still have to worry about it. So navigation, another thing, you don't really have to use these navigation libraries in Compose apps. You don't have to use these stuff. You can just do your own navigation. If you look at Fred's road trip storyteller, I'm not using any of these navigation. I'm just using animated visibility and just scroll left, scroll right. It's like, or I'm using built-in material components to do stuff. I'm not a huge fan of this. Now on Android, Android before this, you had to use some kind of navigation library because it was just too gray hairy to make Android do what you wanted. So anyway, but this is sort of a hangover, I believe. And you do have to know about it because probably people are going to want to use and make their apps this way. It is kind of it is the way right here. This is one route right here. Right here's one route. It is the way that Google has recommended, but you don't really have to use it. You can just use Compose. So I just want to throw that out there. You don't need to do all that stuff. You can see my example of what I mean. If you go to Fred's road trip storyteller, I'm not using any of this stuff. But it does make it, if you're going to have a team and they're already kind of used to this stuff, it becomes obvious how it all works. So if you're going to plan on, like if it's just you, maybe you can skip it. But if it's, or you or somebody else, you can probably skip it. But maybe 3 or 4 people or 5 people, okay, maybe you need to start going that direction. So I see the other side. Here's foldables, how to do the navigation of foldables, which is nice. That's not obvious. They don't make that obvious. So he's kind of included that here, which is pretty cool. But you can see navigation is a bit of a there's some stuff, and it's not, there's ways to avoid it, especially if you're just doing an MVP. If you want to rebuild the version 2 with all the stuff in there because you need it to be ultra tested because you have 50,000 customers, okay, yeah. But if you no customer yet, or 10, no, don't do that. Or 100, or you can just get to 1,000. Why do you need? You don't need all that stuff. No. So that's pretty cool. Includes that stuff there. Persisting data locally, doing background work. Yes. So on Android, doing background work, they got all kinds. They've got people. So many people got involved with scamming because this stuff was not taken care of for the longest time. There was all kinds of stuff that happened. So they kind of went overboard and overkill and put all this stuff in there. So they limited background access. So you have to go through a little bit more trouble to do background tasks than you do on iOS. And this is what this work manager, persisting data. So this is talking about how he's. Oh, so here's got. Oh, what is it talking about? Local database repository pattern. He's using Room. Yeah. So Room has been ported to KMP. I don't know if it's beta or finished yet. I'll probably be finished by the time you see this. So people on Android are used to using Room, and it is pretty good database access type library. So I would recommend it. And he goes into it here. So, but you do have to worry. You have to understand what these little annotations are for, what these things do, how they work. So you do have to go digging a little bit. It's like, okay. I mean, for a lot of apps, a key value store is pretty good. It's pretty good. You can have multiple of them. It's just a key value if that's all you're looking to. And like for Fred's Road Trip Storyteller, all I'm doing is a little bit of a layer, like a database. I'm at my own little database layer on top of a key value store. I mean, a lot of applications, that's all we're doing anyway. Just saving data, saving data for the server, saving data here, saving data here, saving data. That's all we're doing is saving data locally. We're not like structuring it. So why we gotta make a full database on my device? Like it may not be necessary. Okay, persisting data. It just depends on your use case. Like trying doing it easy and then upgrading it later. Why not? Why spend time on stuff when you don't know if you're even gonna need it? I see people like going overboard on these apps, thinking like people are gonna know how these things work inside. They don't care. Your user doesn't care as long as it works and it's working for your team. If it's just you, why not make your life simple? All right, keep going. Migrations. So how you upgrade the database? If you have a new version of it, you add a column. You add a table somewhere. You have to do you can do migrations, which is nice. That is a nice thing about Room. But there's ways to handle that without having to do all this stuff. But for more professional, like very enterprise level, like once you get going, yeah, you're probably gonna wanna standardize and use something like Room. So KMP Room, look into that. That looks like it's gonna be a winner for sure because it's pretty battle hardened. Room came out after a lot of really failed attempts at making some abstractions that made sense. And Room, I believe it. Of all the Android things that came, Google things that happened, they produced, it's pretty good. I mean, you do have to use annotations, but it actually makes sense once you get past the initial learning curve, which isn't too bad. It's not like Dagger 2 level bullshit. Which Hilt, of course, did fix, but I'm ranting about it. You don't need to do that DI that way. So Work Manager, scheduling background tasks. So you're on Android, your app doesn't have to be open, and it can run stuff in the background, like fetching stuff from the server, updating stuff from the server, or whatever. But you do have to do all kinds of stuff to make it work, and it's not obvious. But he does have a nice simple example here. If you want to look at Tasky, look at my Tasky app. It does a lot more advanced stuff, but you can see how that's put together there, and that's just standard Android app. And if we're doing background tasks in KMP, you're gonna have to do this on your Android for doing the background sync. If you need to have background syncing going on, it's going to be a requirement. So at least you know how he breaks it down here. It is pretty important. It is kind of like, what the hell do I have to do? And setting it up is not obvious. And also how to test them, how to test your workers. This is also something that's usually left out. So it's really nice that he shows that here because it's they don't make it easy, or they haven't. Last time I checked, the Google documentation was just half-assed on this stuff. So it's nice to have this breakdown here, like be aware of it, kind of like going in. There's a lot of options there. Runtime permissions, okay. Yeah, so this is, like I was saying, not only do you have to declare the permission, you have to do this whole flow, and you, as a developer, have to handle it, and it's just the way it goes. It's the way it is. And it's not going away for Android, so you still have to deal with this, even with KMP. You still have to deal with this level of stuff, which he does have a pretty good breakdown of how to do this in a KMP application. So it's valuable to knowing how to do this, because you had to roll your own. I had to roll my own. I was like, how does this work? Yeah, so it's doing this for iOS, doing this for Android. It's very different. On iOS, it's just the OS handles it. On Android, you gotta deal with it. And here's some debugging stuff. How to use the debugger, the logcat, all this. Like, what is all this stuff in here? What does it mean? This is pretty good to know about how to read these stack crashes and the crash stacks. I mean, some developers maybe don't understand, but like, it's nice to have okay, this is what this is for. This is what this is for. This is what this is for. Because some of these icons are like what they do and how they work, and like some of those I just found out about really. So leak canaries, I was saying earlier. It's not as critical with KMP for KMP applications. Compose-based applications, it's not as critical. I think with complicated applications, you could get into trouble, but it's not as critical as it used to be with Android. With Android applications, it's pretty easy to get leaks because the way it was set up and how there was a lot of guidance about how to put these things together. So, and the way they structured how the MVC structure. It was just lent itself to being allowing leaks if you just were not super careful, and everyone on a team was super careful. But this thing This thing definitely helps. Setting it up is very simple, and it just waits for something to happen. So it's fun to set up and use. Especially if you're having weird crashes on your app for some reason, like you can't figure out. Like after a while, your app will just dies, and if you see that in your Crashlytics come up. This could be helpful. Again, Chucker, I tried using it, but again, I was always on the Canary versions or alpha or beta versions of these things for KMP lately, last couple of years at least. And so I tried Chucker, but I contacted him because he was like, I couldn't get it to work. He's like, it only works on the release. No, I can't keep up. I don't have enough. It's just me. He's like complaining about. Anyway, I haven't used it very much, but some people like it. Again, you're gonna have to be in the release version to see it. And the network, the application, it's into it here in a second. App inspection. So that has a network inspector right here. Yeah, you don't really have to use Chucker, and it's not critical. And with KTOR stuff, it's the debugging information is so good that you don't really need it. But I mean, every once in a while you may need it. And he shows you how to look at your database here, so you can open up the room database. That's really nice about this is you can inspect the data in here. And man, this used to be on Android. This wasn't around for a long time. You had to use all those kind of external tools and plugins to get this. Like, guys, it's been 15 years. Could you get okay? They finally did it, so you're lucky. If you just came here, if you're new, you're lucky because this wasn't a thing for a long time. And network inspector, so you can look at your traffic, once you get that all set up properly. And you look at your background jobs and schedules and workers and stuff. So that's super nice to this used to be a complete mystery up until about 2019, 2020. So yeah, Google's falling down. At least we got JetBrains picking it up and looks like taking the helm. Here we got what is this here? Enhancing code quality. So it's Kotlin style, a little bit about how people normally do stuff. The linter will often pick up on it and give you suggestions anyway, but by default, so a lot of stuff isn't critical. But it's just how things are done a little bit. Like most developers, how they see it. This is a pretty good overview. Sealed interfaces and sealed classes are used quite a bit. Functional programming is kind of the norm now, which is just what they call functional, is just using these functional lambda functions that takes it. So the reduce function takes into a sum and some element and produces this. In this case, just adds them together. But like using these things as opposed to for loops, that's well known. And the AI will suggest these things as well for you. So if you don't know what they are, you can get suggestions on how to improve them. But this is basically reducing. Instead of doing your own for loop, which is error prone, and people have to look at another developer has to go like, oh, okay, you're just adding things together. Another developer can look at this, or you can look at this and go, oh, I'm just adding these together. That's all I'm doing here. Or I'm doing some sort of thing where I'm iterating through a list and doing some function to each one of them, ending at the result. That is what that's what that's for. And it's good to use them because you don't have to code that whole for loop, and you're also going to reduce a whole set of bugs. And there's all like map. There's a whole series of them, and they all make sense once you understand what's going on. It's like, oh yeah, this is better. So coroutines, doing again background tasks, it goes into that a little bit. The when statement, how that's put together. Some linting, it's already built in. You don't really KT-lint. I've heard people use it. I tried setting it up once and I couldn't get it going. I don't know what I did something wrong. But there's a linter built into the thing, so it gives you some of these hints anyway. There's that. Let's see here. Formatting, performance, and detect. I've also heard good things about detect, but not used it. But for bigger teams, like when you get more than 3 people on a big project, it may make sense. Especially if you're about to, if you're going to be merging into the main. So it's helpful, but it's not going to catch everything, right? It's not going to let you know you have good code. It'll just say, okay, code's bad here, code's bad here, code's bad. It doesn't say the code's good. It doesn't mean the code's bad here. It's bad here. This means you want to look at this. This is the smell. This usually doesn't, what is this? But it's not, I think there's a lot of things that detect can do maybe with the AI, with like an enhanced AI thing. But again, false positive hallucinations, no. There's certain things just like, okay, there's certain things we don't want to have a certain way, and make sure it just doesn't get it through. Okay, that's cool. It's for larger teams. For smaller teams, I don't think it's as critical. There's some leak canary stuff. Testing. So this is a thing a lot of developers have skipped. I've been in a lot of companies, they just totally skip this. And if it's just an MVP or a proof of concept, you can probably skip it. You can probably skip testing out because it's going to be changing so much that it's going to be difficult. It's going to become a lag on you to add a test. Now, that said, once you have your 100 customers or whatever, you're gonna have to add some tests because, and if you want to hand it off to another developer, you're gonna have to add the tests. Sorry, unless you want to be answering a bunch of questions all the time and dealing with random errors, especially if you get another developer involved. You have to you're gonna make your life so much easier if you add the tests and if you build the app to be testable. That means you're probably gonna add a view model. And it's not terrible, but it makes testing so much easier. Now, there's been some things with Compose that allow you to do testing without doing all that stuff, which do snapshot UI testing, which is actually great because oftentimes it's all you kind of want. But there may be some more advanced use case where you do want to test the happy path, and the only way to make that really work and to make sure it's solid and you have more than a couple developers on the team, maybe 3 developers or more, and you want to make sure before anything goes through, nothing else, you haven't stepped on anybody else's toes. It's actually more difficult with Compose apps than they used to be with the Android apps, with the imperative shit poking each other. Everything's poking everything else. Yeah, the way they used to set those things up. Yeah, but with Compose is not as bad. So, the need for the testing on KMP apps is not as critical, except for the happy path. So, just take it with a grain of salt. It used to be way more important. It's still important, but it's not as important because we're using this declarative style with the Compose. So it's not as critical, but still necessary once you get to a certain stage. I would not do this for proof of concept. I would not do this. I would not always. If you don't even know what your business is, you don't even know your domain as well as you should, or you're just trying something out. Doing a micro monopoly, do not add testing. Skip it. Maybe where you're doing the data input, data output, yeah, okay. If you're doing some sort of scraping, yeah. Like I do in Fred's road trip storyteller, I have tests there for unit tests for scraping, for the scrapes I get off of the historical marker database website, which is public. So I have tests for that, but I don't test the app. It's mostly a Google Map anyway, so Am I testing the Google map? I mean, no, that's just a thing that's critical, like that I need to make sure doesn't break if this guy's website breaks. So, and how that scraping happens, that's a critical part. So I decided not to add tests there. And if for some reason that thing blows up and I have 10,000, 1,000 users, 10,000 users, and they want me to add all kinds of features on it, okay, I'm probably gonna switch over to view models and add tests and get another developer involved so we can work in tandem on it. That's the reason you add tests. So, and here's the mock web server. So for doing mock requests, this is great. He shows how to set this up because that's not super obvious. I've actually had a lot of problems with some of this stuff in the past, but setting this test up, this is actually quite useful and not obvious how to do some of this stuff. And he's using retrofit here. If you use the KTOR client, you would just use the KTOR client here in the same way. So that's good for that. And then here testing out the database, how to do a mock in-memory database, because you don't want to have to actually hit do saving data to the device. So that's what you're setting up your test down here, and that's one of the main reasons why you want to use Room, is to set up these type of tests for complex data in and out. For most cases, it's probably not necessary. So it's like, test what you want to make sure works, not everything. I don't think it's useful. Test the happy path. Like once you get things going, you have users, whatever, test the happy path. But the edge cases, if you do find an edge case, okay, write a test for that and make sure it's like not hit it again if you get a bug there. But in general, 100% test coverage, I think that's time not well spent that could be spent on serving your customer better, or serving a different customer. If you're already full up on one, go find some new customers. There's lots of things out there to do, and adding 100% test coverage is not always the best use of time. I don't know where that 100% test coverage thing came from. Maybe it's because they have a little number there. Like that's like a metric you're supposed to try and hit. I don't know if it's all that useful for most applications. For certain applications, it's super critical, right? Like if you're writing a compiler, oh yeah, you have tests for all kinds of shit, everything you think of. But if you're just pulling data off a server, I mean, are you trying to test what are you trying to test there? Just think about it. You don't have to be white knuckling on the testing. I think it's a little overboard. Now, again, previous Android, imperative all over the place, everything's poking everything else, everything's looking all fingers everywhere like this. Yeah, testing is super important, especially if you're going to continue to write your app like that. Oh yeah, it's a big problem because you will touch this thing over here. Oh, you broke 16 things over here that you didn't know about. But with the Compose stuff, it's like it's kind of all right there, right? Everything that will be on that screen is happening right there. So if you do something, okay, it's going to be happening right there. It's not going to be 16 things over there that we're counting on that thing never changing. All right, here we go. Keep going here. Add a UI test, yes. So this is somewhat difficult. And to like comprehend and get your head around, mostly because they don't really talk about this test tag thing, and I'm glad he talks about it here, because this is the important thing that we usually don't put in the apps. It's like not obvious, like how do we test this thing? It's like the first button down from the left. Like no, you had to add this test tag thing. So that's what that's for. And it makes it a lot easier setting up the data. And then you check the tag nodes when you do the pet list, so that's they make sure that the things are displayed in the right area, which is like there's a new service that's like built into the IDE, which will do snapshots of these. So if it's just to check the data is there, maybe we can just do screenshot comparison. I don't know, and we'll eliminate the need to write these tests like this. Which, what is it really doing? Okay, you're showing this data on the screen. Okay. Are you testing Compose here? What are you testing? I don't get it. I mean, if you want to confirm that each screen is set up properly, if you have a team of people and you want to make sure that you write this test ahead of time and make sure they go implement it, I mean, I guess, but can you just show them screenshots that can make it look like this? Like, okay, yeah. And then you run that screenshot utility, which is probably why they've written it, because what is this really? That just compares the screenshot from the last time. And was that one okay? It's like, this one's okay. All right. Well, it'll highlight areas like, it changed here. Is that right? It's like, yes or no. Or that's not supposed to change. That kind of level of stuff. So there was a moment in Android where everyone was super obsessed with testing, thinking that was going to fix that spaghetti problem, and it did. But the thing is, it was fixing a problem that was, the spaghetti was the problem, not adding the tests. So now we're in this phase. It's like, okay, we've reduced the cognitive load, we reduced the imperativeness of everything everywhere. So there's other things we do need to test still, like, the input output, and from web scraping, or if you're doing a database, some sort of advanced function that you put something here and it's going to end up in other places. And you want to make sure that that's all done properly. Yes, things that are not obvious, that you're not going to just look at the thing. It's not going to be like, oh, it's obvious what this does, or it's like, if it's like there's something that's not obvious, right? That another developer would come in and go, okay, there's nothing here, but there is something there, and you want to make sure that that's reflected in the test, right? That makes sure that that's set up that way. That's the idea. Test happy path and edge cases and things that are like, huh? Why'd you do it like that? Or if you run across, if somebody like one of your developers like, oh, okay, that's where the edge case comes. It's like, why'd you do it like that? It's like, okay. All right. Okay, so publishing your app. This is not obvious either. The Google Play Store is really different than the Apple stuff. It's got similarities, overlaps, but the Play Store is more complicated. So as far as like my experience doing both stores, Play Store is much more complicated. I was expecting to go into the Apple's App Store, like, and go like, oh, this is gonna be another terrible experience. Like, no, it was pretty nice. Pretty straightforward. Wasn't difficult. It wasn't as difficult as this fucking monster. All right, so here's the things you have to do. That a lot of developers take for granted, but this is stuff you have to set up. Add the Crashlytics, turn off the logs, turn off the debugging. Maybe you need an initialize. Who knows? Improve the error messages, to test your app on different devices, which the latest IDE from JetBrains allows that a lot easier to have happen. It has been in the past, what a nightmare. I cannot believe it took them that long to do a remote testing service that lets you test. You had to have all the devices in your house. There's thousands of those damn things. Really, and Compose KMP is like abstracted a lot of that stuff away, so we don't have to be as, oh my god, Model 6 of the Nokia line of 2019, our app crashes on launch. It's like, that doesn't, we're trying to get away from all that baloney, which at the time was necessary. I get it. But we need to get away from that stuff. We need to abstract that stuff away. Come on. So, I mean, our app is not too big. That is not as critical as it used to be. And again, you can tell this guy's been a developer for a while, because at one moment it was like a critical thing. Now it depends on where your market is and what kind of phones you really need to work on. But Compose, you can work on tiny little apps. Just don't put a lot of graphics bitmaps in there. It's like, okay. I mean, it's not as critical as it used to be. It used to be the network time was, people would bail because the thing was taking too long to download. That's not really a thing anymore. Like, there's a lot of things that aren't an issue. I mean, it's good to be concerned about, but I'm not really limiting what I'm trying to do by the size of my app. I'm not even really paying attention. So that's my own personal opinion on that. Yes, and you have to do. They won't let you do APKs anymore, so you have to do this Android app bundle, which is basically a way of separating the resources. So only the resources that are downloaded for that country or whatever it is, or area of the world. That's what they did this for. It wasn't for most of the developers who are doing these micro monopolies, they're going to do a localized one just in your area or your particular niche, and it doesn't really make sense, but you still have to do the A/B, which is just it's not that different. It's really not that different. You have to set these key stores. Super important to get this done. And he goes through and talks about how to set that stuff up a little bit here. At least touches on it, which you have to keep those keys separate. Do not check them into GitHub. Don't check your keys in, by the way. Figure with you. Find a password manager. Set those up in a password manager. He doesn't really talk about that here, but he should. Anyway, I mentioned it, so now you know. And then here's how to get it onto the Play Store. You have to set up your developer account, which just costs a little bit of money. Oh, it's only $25. That's cool. Maybe that's... I lowered the price. That's awesome. And create your application, which goes through all the steps here, which is kind of nice to go through at least once. And there's like certain things you can't do, and they want to know what your app is doing, and they will boot you off if you abuse that stuff. So just be aware that people have lost their account for doing all kinds of stuff. So just be aware that that's a thing. And never, by the way, never publish apps for anybody else, no matter how much, unless you want to lose your account, of course. Don't publish apps for other people. That's a bad idea. Well, I mean, unless you want your cousin who'll never be an app developer, he can put his social security number in, set it all up under his name just to get it taken down. I guess somebody can get some Christmas money out of that. All right, so news apps. He goes through the whole thing here, all different steps. That's awesome. And talks about how you set. Okay, this is pretty good here. How do you do your? What is this internal app? And what are these different testing tracks here? What are these different things? And, yeah. So he goes into some detail about how that works and how the store is put together, what that all means. Yeah. And then he gets into CI. So this is something a lot of developers don't want to do either. It's setting up your CI/CD pipeline so you can do pre-flight checks, and this is for teams. For two or three people, I don't think you really need this, but once you get past 3 people and want a standard pattern to release for your applications, yeah, you're probably gonna want to set this up just at least to have a sanity check before anything is pushed into your main branch from a developer that you might have hired or something. Yeah, it may make sense. And he goes into how that stuff works. What is he using? GitLab? No, it's GitHub Actions. Awesome. Yeah, so it's similar to other companies' offerings for doing this stuff, which is pretty nice. Yeah, so he goes through how to set that all up, and I am a big fan of having everything done on one platform. If you're going to use GitHub, they have everything you need for project planning, for managing your community, for managing your developers, for managing your schedule, for managing all of it. It can be all done on GitHub. You don't need to go to these other services unless you get banned on GitHub. Bad. Don't. You must be doing something really bad to get banned on GitHub. Anyway, so yeah, there's all that stuff. How did this handle secrets? Is this handle secrets? Get Play Store. Oh, yeah. This is not obvious how to set this up. So cool. He goes through how to set the secrets up. That's awesome. That's very cool. So yeah, that's not obvious. It took me a while to figure out how to do that. The whole team left, and I was just like on my own figuring that stuff out, which I got it eventually. It's not clear and not super straightforward, at least when I was doing it. But I got it. I got it how I wanted it. So, and here's Firebase. He goes into Firebase Crashlytics a little bit here, which you definitely want to add. It's a free service. With the latest IDEs, it'll actually show you the exact line. It'll give you the report, the crash report, and it'll show you the exact line where the crash is happening. And that's brand new. We didn't have that before. You had to go hunt it down. It was a pain in the dick. seriously freaking hard, man. But now, super easy. This is right here. It's happening right here. It's happened 16 times in the last 24 hours. Like, oh shit, I gotta. Oh, that's why I left the string was left a comma off. So here's some more analytics. So I haven't played with analytics too much. I would like to play with it more. We had other stuff that we're using inside of our app to figure out what people are doing. And we're only interested in certain things anyway. Yeah, it shows about this is like a little bonus. Shows up how to do Firebase notifications and in-app messaging, which is free and definitely makes things easier for your application. And then it goes into like securing your app a little bit about what are some areas that could be taking advantage of this. Just mentions it, and then the index, and yeah, so. That is my review of mastering Kotlin for Android 14 by Harun Wangareka. And yeah, you can go check out all those resources. I'll leave a link to where you hit the Amazon site. And yeah, that's it for me. Give me a like and subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon. Oh, my beard's out of control.